played that game where you try to remember the objects on a tray. It's known as Kim's game, and I expect you might have played it when you were younger perhaps. You put the objects on a tray and cover them up with a cloth, and one of them is secretly taken away, and then the cloth comes off and you all have to try and remember what is missing. A feat of memory. Memory, yes, but not really remembering. If you've ever played this game, I bet you are remembering it now. The fun, the laughter, the company. This is remembering. Mentally and emotionally placing yourself back into a moment. Remembering the thoughts, feelings, smells, and relationships. That is the difference between memory and remembering. One is simple factual recall, while the other forms us as human beings. I wonder what we will remember from the last 18 months. The facts and the figures, or the emotions of lockdown and the pressures of isolation. Remembering connects us individually and collectively, telling us who we are, where we come from, and linking us to community, to friends, and to family. The loss of the Great War was dramatic and traumatic. It affected community throughout the country. Many didn't talk about it for years, but collectively, the nation needed to remember. The trauma and loss of life was so significant that remembering became vital. Not simply a list of battles fought, but a remembering of people, of lives, of relationships, the importance of lost individuals as members of the community. Remembering an individual within a collective remembering of millions. Because those who died had value. They had innate worth. For all it is the overwhelming numbers that we recall and remember in history books, we recall those things in history books, those overwhelming numbers. But the grief was for the individual. It's interesting that on this day, we often remember a specific family member. And as the years have passed, it has increasingly become a family member of whom we may have no memory, and yet remembering is still important. In my own family, we remember someone I never met. My great-grandfather, John Warden Stansby. He was an officer in the North Staffordshire Regiment, and he fought at Ypres and the Battle of the Somme. He was wounded at Ypres, and he returned later to the Somme, where he was wounded again, and this time taken prisoner for 2 years. After that, he returned home, and life for him and his family was never the same again. Stories such as these are treasured by us. Not because of any memory we have of that person, perhaps, but because we know that individual mattered within our family story. It's through this remembering that generations and their stories interweave and matter. Jesus reminds us in our Gospel reading from Mark today that wars will continue to happen. And sadly, this war to end all wars did not end conflicts. And so we remember many who have died in conflict since. Generations past and indeed present, whose stories of war and its impact are remembered. When we are in despair, we can feel that God has forgotten us, that we have been abandoned. Even Jesus on the cross shouted out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This heartfelt cry of the deep human fear of being forgotten certainly found an echo in the trenches of the First World War, and for many who have known armed conflict. The prophet Isaiah speaks into this space. Can a mother forget the babe at her breast and have no compassion for the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. In the middle of desolation, forsakenness, the isolation of being forgotten, it is being remembered which gives us back our humanity, evidenced on the engraved palms of God. Remembering is a human action that helps us to feel valued. God tells us that remembering is even more a divine action that gives value to humanity. Today is an opportunity to remember and grieve, personally and collectively, giving back our humanity in the worst of circumstances. God tells us that we matter more to God than a baby does to its mother, that remembering is a divine action that gives value to humanity, that Christ is prepared to sacrifice himself for us. Today, we remember those who have also followed in that command. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. We, their friends, will remember them and their innate worth as human beings, both to us and to God. Amen.